Hi, I'm Callie and welcome to Kapowski Reads and welcome to week 2 of 75 booked. I am carrying over one book from week 1, which is Welcome to the Hyunam-Dong Bookshop by Hwang Bo-Reum. And I am starting this week with this book half read. And I'm also starting a new book this week, which is It Girl, The Life and Legacy of Jane Birkin by Marisa Meltzer. This is actually going to be my 4th book by Marisa Meltzer. I'm not going to say I'm a super fangirl, I'm just going to say I really like this author's writing. And she writes non-fiction books that are often about topics that I'm just interested in. So I enjoy her writing, I enjoy the topics. I generally have a great time with Marisa Meltzer's writing. This focuses on Jane Birkin, who is probably, I would say her legacy in 2026 is probably being the inspiration behind the Birkin handbag, which is, if I were to list my 5 dream handbags, the Birkin bag is on that list. I will never own one, but I mean, it would be nice. But she was so much more than that. She was more than a fashion icon. When you see so many, I don't know what, maybe other people have different algorithms to me, but my algorithm shows me a lot of like style videos. I like to watch them on YouTube and I really like to watch some compilations, and almost every single one, when it's got some kind of narrative surrounding classic style or it girl or boho, it features pictures of Jane Birkin. Like, she was just the stylish girl of, I was going to say the 60s, but she was the stylish woman like throughout her entire life. I don't know a huge amount about Jane Birkin. I know, obviously, about her style. I know she was an actor. She is in a couple of sort of original 1970s, I want to say, Agatha Christie adaptations. And she was a singer as well. So I'm excited to read this and learn a little bit more about her life and just have a really good time reading some non-fiction, which is just kind of to break things up a bit. But I actually do have an update because I finished reading this book this morning. I wanted to tell you the books I was reading, but then thought there's no point in me coming back tomorrow to film my update when I finished it this morning. So I will tell you my update for this book now. When last we spoke, I said I was not having the best time. I was considering DNFing, but I'm glad I didn't. I'm glad I stuck with this book because the second half, the last 120 or so pages were really good. And I got a lot of character backstory. I got to know what was the sort of driving force behind the bookshop being opened and what the owner had been sort of hiding from everybody, not just the reader, but from everyone in her life. And I felt like that is information that would have been so useful earlier on in the book, because I felt like I finally got what was missing, but I got it so late in the book. I still felt like I didn't really know the characters that well towards the end. This was a very light read. It wasn't too taxing. I did feel the dialogue felt quite stilted, but I can't blame that on the author because it's a translated fiction. So sometimes dialogue maybe just doesn't translate in a way that feels natural in a different language. So there's that. I found the bookshop to be, a lot of the patrons had a very strange relationship with the bookshop, because they would email the owner as if she was their friend and not the owner of a business that they frequented. It was a very almost like parasocial relationship that was very unusual to me. But again, this could be something that was maybe lost in translation or is perhaps a different sort of cultural thing. This book came out in 2022, it was translated in 2023, so that will be when I bought it. And I found there was a lot of like social media included that I feel social media can really date a book, especially when it's it just felt weird. It felt so unusual. There would be copies of her like Instagram posts or blog posts, and there would be these really weird hashtags that I just thought, would any business use that? Like, hashtag work-life balance. Okay, but what is the relevancy? It was very strange. I found there was a very blurry line for the owner between being a business owner and then being too, I don't want to say too overly friendly with the patrons, because obviously you can be friends with your patrons, that's fine. You can be friends with people who shop in your shop, but it just felt a really strange relationship to have. I've never had that kind of relationship with a shop, and I have places that I go regularly and I like the people I see and I'm like, oh hi, lovely to see you. We have a little bit of a natter, but I don't comment on their blogs. I don't even know if I know any of their blog. I don't seek them out. I don't know. It was very strange, but like I say, it could just be a different, either something that was lost in translation or just a different cultural norm. So I'm not going to judge that. I'm just going to say it felt a little unusual to me. But other than that, I didn't love it. I gave it a 3-star, but that is mainly because the second half answered a lot of questions that I had, and the pacing kind of picked up a little bit more. Things happened in the second half, but the first half really, it took a while for me to really care about the book. I also did a Jane Fonda workout today. It was so fun. It's so exhausting, but it's so much fun. Not the one with the woman who, there's 2 Jane Fonda workouts that I do. They're both on YouTube. And there's one where a woman just sings the same song for like 4 workouts. And I'm like, I can't be doing that. So I do the other one, which includes like, there's a routine and they're like, this is our Scottish reel. And as a Scottish person, I'm like, no, it's not. But it's fun. And it's a good workout. So that was my day. I am going to be picking up next. I'm going to tell you what my next book is now. We're starting the summer TBR with this guy, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. It is a big book. It is over 1,000 pages. And it is about 2 magicians during the Napoleonic Wars. We're talking like early 1800s. And they are using magic. They're bringing magic to the war. This takes place in a version of our world where there are thought to be no magicians. People study magic, but they're like, there is nobody who can do magic. And then Mr. Norrell shows up and he's all cocky and arrogant. He's like, actually, babes, I can. And I've only read a little bit so far, but he has already basically challenged the society of magicians to be like, if I can prove to you I can do magic, you have to stop your little society. And I'm like, the drama. There's so much drama already. It's a very enjoyable read so far. I am, however, hating the footnotes. One of my biggest pet peeves in a book. Is it my biggest? I have a lot of pet peeves in books, but one of my most hated things in books is when there are footnotes, unless the book is a classic or unless it's a non-fiction. Generally, I do not want footnotes in my book. If it is important enough to the story, it needs to be in the story. But there are a lot of footnotes. Some of them are taking up like 2/3 of the page. And they're just sort of referencing either texts that don't exist in our world. So I'm like, what's the value in that? Or they're making like witty one-liners, or they're providing really interesting stories. I'm like, you could take a sidebar. Take a sidebar, give me a whole chapter of that. That sounds lovely. But I hate having to sort of read the footnote, then go to the next page to finish the footnote, then go back to the page to finish the page. It annoys me. I just want to read my book. So other than that, I'm having a fun time. I will be back with updates in a bit. Today is a glorious day because I'm wearing sleeves. The temperature has dropped just a little bit, but enough that I don't feel like I'm cooking constantly. And it rained, so there's been a little bit of a break in pressure. Don't know about anyone else, but when it's that kind of weather, you just know thunder's coming. I get such bad headaches. Body's so dramatic. I went out for a walk. I had to take a book back to the library. My copy of The Count of Monte Cristo, I just hadn't had time to go to the library and drop it off. Even though I'd bought myself a copy of it, I had to take it back. And so on the whole walk, I was like, I don't want to get my book wet. I also finished reading It Girl by Marisa Meltzer. I really enjoyed this book. I was familiar with Jane Birkin, but not intimately familiar in a way that this book was. I didn't know a whole lot about her dating history. I didn't know about her children. I just kind of knew about her basically being the it girl, being the inspiration behind the Birkin bag, being an actor, and I knew about her singing, but I didn't even realise she was singing with her long-term partner. I think I was like, I don't care about him. Let me know about Jane. So I really enjoyed it. I found it to be very engaging. There's a lot of sadness, especially towards the end of the book. She loses a lot of people who are very important to her in very short succession. And that does include the loss of her child, who we read about as sort of having struggled throughout most of their life. So it is truly heartbreaking, the last few chapters. I was just sobbing throughout because there was just so much sadness, and you just see her being in so much pain. The book, at the end, there are some notes that basically say that in addition to public records and things, Jane's diary entries were used in the creation of this book. So it's very personal, and that kind of felt a little, I don't know, I always feel a bit strange when I read something and it includes diary entries of somebody who is no longer with us. And I feel, unlike the other books I read by this author, I have read Glossy about Emily Weiss from Glossier. I have read, can't remember the titles. I've read the one that's about Weight Watchers. That was utterly fascinating. And I read one that was about 90s riot girl music. I would say if you are interested in reading more about Jane Birkin, this is a very engaging read, and it's a very enjoyable read. It's very short as well. There's a lot of references at the back, so the book looks longer than it is. It was only about 200 pages, so very easily consumed. I do know what I'm going to be reading next though. Obviously I'm not going to be reading it today, but the next book I'm going to be picking up is my first book by Honor Levy. This, I want to read it because it seems like it's going to be super nostalgic for 2000s chat rooms, and that is my nostalgia. There's also a cat on the cover. I wanted this specific edition because it has a cat on the cover. There are other editions that are very Y2K, but I wanted the pink cat. And of course, I've got a little kitty cat bookmark that will go with it. This is quite short, so I'm hopeful I can have this finished before this vlog ends, and that's my plan. I'm in the office tomorrow, so I do have a little bit more reading time because I'm going to go in, have a coffee, have a breath, and probably take this because Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell is it's big. I'm not carrying this into the office when I could carry this. This is much heavier. This is much lighter. I'm taking this one in. I have now finished reading my first book by Honor Levy, and I really, really enjoyed this book. It was very short, so I didn't really have cause to come back and give you sort of a halfway update because it's short stories, so there wasn't a natural moment to do that. I feel like this book has perhaps been misdescribed to a bunch of people. I'm basing this on my own experience, but also on some of the reviews that I have seen, where the general assumption for this book going in was that it was going to be short stories about growing up as a person who is very online. I was expecting this to be millennial nostalgia, sort of live journals, AOL chat rooms, MySpace, Bebo, all of that jazz. But it wasn't. It was more focused on, or entirely focused on, the Gen Z experience, which, I mean, coming of age books are coming of age books, regardless of what generation they're focused on. And while I did not have my visa for a Gen Z experience, I had a wonderful time with this. And I feel like, regardless of what age you are, there's something about a coming of age story that just kind of hits. And I like that. I found it to be incredibly relatable. There were some chapters that I was like, I feel so seen. There are no unique experiences. Because this book is first and foremost about just growing up. It covered kind of the span of teenage life through to late 20s, which is, the author is 29, I think, 28. The online element was present throughout all of the stories, but it wasn't about being online. It was about growing up. These people are also pretty much constantly online in a sort of world where you're constantly just on. I have a colleague, I was reading this at work and I was almost finished, but I wasn't quite. And one of my colleagues asked me about it, and she's 27, and I was telling her about it, and she was like, I think that sounds amazing. And I was like, I will loan you this book when I finish it. And I finished it now. So I'm going to loan her it. And I think that while I got lots out of this book, I think it maybe might be even more relevant for someone who is currently still going through those sort of formative years. She has impeccable reading taste. We have a lot of like crossover, so she will either love this or hate it. Either way, she doesn't need to buy it to read it, so it's a win-win. The writing style of this just got me. It was kind of a stream of consciousness / word vomit kind of writing style, just everything out on the page, but it was also very beautifully written. I would be reluctant to say that this book was entirely vibes based, because it was really full of some wonderful content, but it definitely had a sort of sit back and enjoy the vibes element to it. My favourite story in this was Cancel Me, but there were a few stories where I just found myself kind of choking up a little and just being like, it is so relatable. But I also think that I feel so sorry for people who literally grew up on the internet. Like, yes, I had my formative years on social media, but there was a good period of time where I didn't exist online. And I just can't imagine. I can't imagine it. And it's, yeah, I'm very fortunate. And reading this collection, I just realised how fortunate I am to have had some time growing up where I wasn't even, I think we had a class computer. But when I say class computer, I mean like for the entire floor. So that was, primaries 3 to 7. We had one computer for all of those classes. And I think I used it maybe once a month. There'd be like 6 of you around a computer typing with one finger. It just wasn't a thing. I do want to say that I have seen a bunch of like quite negative reviews for this book, but all of the negative reviews I feel are completely valid. But the reasons that some people didn't like the book are the exact reasons I did like it. I liked the characters that weren't particularly likable. I liked the stream of consciousness writing style. I liked the sort of hold on tight, this is a wild ride. There's no seatbelts. You're just going to get thrown around. And I loved the character art. There was art at the beginning of every chapter. How cool is this? And every chapter had a piece of art, and it was done in a style that you could have typed on a computer. I loved it. But I also wanted to give a recommendation / if you've read this book, you might like this. I felt like The Idiot by Elif Batuman was really similar in tone to my first book. Like a very, you don't love her main character going through a lot and experiencing life and possibly not overly growing from it. And I feel these two books have those similarities, and I loved them both. I'm also going to give you a little update of where I am now that this week is over. So this week I have finished 3 books. I have finished and loved my first book by Honor Levy. I have finished and not loved Welcome to the Hyunam-Dong Bookshop by Hwang Bo-Reum. And I have finished and enjoyed It Girl by Marisa Meltzer. I'm also partway through 2 books which I will be carrying over to next week, and they are our good friend Jonathan Stranger, Mr. Norrell. I am currently a third of crack the spinal wall, a third of the way through this book. I'm liking it, but I am finding it difficult to, I don't want to pick it up. Like some books, you know, you've got a free 10 minutes or so and you just go, I'll just read a few pages. This is not one of those books. I'm reading it, but I'm not wanting to gravitate towards it when I'm not. But there have been some sort of more fairy tale, fae elements to the book, and I'm really liking those. I'm just not loving rich men arguing. It bores me, but maybe we'll get more magic and I will be back. I am also probably about a third of the way through Weird Facts by Lynne Tillman. It's a fun enough novella so far, very short vignettes, and they're short and snappy and they're interesting. So I'll finish these 2 books. No, I won't. I'll finish this book in the next video. I will make progress in this book. In the next one, I think this book is going to be our friend for the next couple of weeks, and that's okay. Let me know if you've read any of these books. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!